Like it just didn't pick up it wasn't sustainable. And so we decided to pull the plug. The loneliness is very real. You feel like you're the only person making that move. And it can be extremely scary because, and I get this a lot from people who talk to me about trying to transition, is I want better work-life balance. There's lots of people who say that and they want to quit medicine, but that's not always the case.
I was going through your LinkedIn profile, so I saw few of the experiences which you mentioned there. So I will be naming it. So what we expect is that to share your insights. What was your What was your learning experiences, job role, and any other thing you can add up about it. So the very first is Pfizer.
Yeah, sure. So Pfizer was my first job out of MBBS. I worked in the medical affairs team at Pfizer. So it's basically the medical affairs team is a team of scientific experts. So a lot of the MD pharmacology people end up there, people with PhDs, people with like specific healthcare master's programs, pharmacy degrees, etc., all end up in medical affairs. They tend to be, clinical or scientific experts for particular products. And so my role over there initially started off with more content creation for doctors. And so they do a lot of like educational programs for physicians on, you obviously don't want to talk about basic topics. You want to talk about niche topics in your specific scientific area. And so my job was to use my clinical experience and my ability to do research on like Google Scholar and all of these PubMed and stuff to create content for doctors. And then that was sent out, via different channels. That's how it started. And then I moved to a very specific medical advisor role for cardiovascular, urology, ophthalmology products for Pfizer. And that was, again, it was a lot of content creation. It was a lot of, looking at drug safety, looking at aspects of the regulatory process, speaking at conferences, trying to publish as much as you can about the particular product. So it was a pretty broad job description. And the last one at Pfizer was I was working in digital transformation. And so that's become a big area across healthcare. And it's become a big part of what my, what my journey has looked like since Pfizer as well. Everyone's looking at ways in which digital can change the business. You have digital health trying to change healthcare, and you have everything else that's going with all these tech companies. There's so much going on. And so the last one was, how do we use digital tools to improve how medical affairs works? And so that was my third role, where, we were trying to find new tools and new ways to use digital platforms to improve medical affairs. But I think from an experience perspective, I think Pfizer taught me a lot. It's a massive organization. They were absolutely amazing people to work with. I have extremely fond memories there, and there's lots of people I worked with who I'm still friends with today. But it gave me my big break after quitting clinical medicine. And so I'll definitely always be indebted to Pfizer for getting me started on that journey.
All right, sir. So the next, which was mentioned, is hybrid healthcare and meditative research.
Yeah, so there were two startups that I worked on post Pfizer. One was LifeGrid, one which was more a digital platform. It was meant to be specifically for people with genetic disorders in India. So we were almost trying. I mean, in retrospect, I think we may have been. It was the wrong market and the wrong time. But what we were trying to do was create a database of patients with genetic disorders in India. And so we were trying to do this in 2018. And the goal was eventually, when gene therapies and all come into India, we'll have this database that already exists, and then we can, try and help market access from there. It didn't work. We tried commercializing it. The model didn't work, and so that's why we entered the company. We tried it. We did a couple of pilots. We started at special schools in Mumbai, and like it just didn't pick up it wasn't sustainable. And so we decided to pull the plug on that company. And the other one was Medtiv, which was a medical device company. So that one is specifically focused on a device to prevent pressure ulcers embedded in patients. And so think of it as an intelligent mattress, which has pressure, temperature, and humidity sensors. And so typically to prevent pressure ulcers in an ICU, you use an airbed or a waterbed. We wanted to find a better way to do that, compared to turning a patient every 2 hours or just having or water or an airbed. And this was specifically for ICUs and ITUs. I think we managed to build a prototype, but the commercial model failed just because we were trying to scale in India, and in India the economics just didn't make sense because people couldn't really see the value in it wasn't such a massive difference in patient outcomes versus using an air or a water bed to justify the cost of for an ICU setup or a hospital. And so the commercial model failed there. I think the unmet need was really strong, but the commercial model just didn't work out. And so I think the two learnings I had from startups was one, you need to do it full time. Both of those startups I did part-time, meaning I had other stuff going on. I had a job outside of those. And so it wasn't 200% of my attention, which is what you need to give to a startup. So I think that was my biggest learning. If I ever do a startup again, it's full-time or nothing. And secondly is healthcare is a very difficult industry to start a company in. There's processes, it's slow, people don't like to change. And so you can't see success in a year or two. You need to look at a 5, 8, maybe even 10-year horizon, depending on whether you're looking at software or hardware. And so I don't think we gave it that runway as well. And so those were my two biggest lessons from startups. It taught me a ton of stuff. But it's at the same time, I wish we had done more with those companies.
All right, so that was a very wonderful learning. So the next is Genentech.
So Genentech was the company I worked with part-time while doing my MBA. I was working on a really interesting blockchain project called MediLedger, which was basically trying to use blockchain for as a tool for traceability. So, for example, when the drug leaves a manufacturing site, it will go through a stockist, a distributor, a pharmacy, and then finally dispensed to the patient, right? So there's a whole journey on the way.
Yes.
And counterfeiting is a huge problem along the way. Inventory is a big problem. So sometimes expired drugs reach a patient. Has been pushing for more traceability, and they were trying. MediLedger as a program is trying to use blockchain to try and address that. And so there's a whole bunch of companies, and this is public knowledge, it's public open source now. There's a whole bunch of companies in the US trying to get onto this MediLedger network to address this issue. And so my job was less on the traceability side, but more on the other side, which was how do we work with all of the different players, in that supply chain? How can Genentech as a company work with stockists, work with distributors, work with pharmacy benefit managers, etc., to create this ecosystem? And I knew nothing about blockchain before getting into that project. So I was sitting on Coursera before in my interviews, trying to learn what blockchain was and trying to figure out what was going on. And then it's to this day the hardest job I've ever had because of the level of complexity, technology-wise, as well as just I think business-wise and industry-wise, I think it was a completely different area of healthcare I hadn't seen before. But 100% one of the most difficult, but definitely the most knowledgeable projects I've ever worked on. It was a really, really interesting project. Sadly, Genentech went through a global hiring freeze in the end of my internship. And so, it was unfortunate. I would have loved to have worked for them full time, but things just didn't work out that way. And then consulting worked out. And so it's, sometimes a lot of things are just luck and being at the right place at the right time. And so it definitely wasn't a planned shift into consulting, but in retrospect, I think that worked out really well. But Genentech was and amazing company to work for. I know a lot of people in India who work for Roche, which is part of Roche is the bigger organization, and culture-wise, people-wise, it was a really great company and a really great project.
The MBA is also glorified. Also, there are the like other side of the MBA. So, what are your thoughts when someone opt for the unconventional path?
Yeah. So let me start with the positives, and then we can go into some of the other, I guess, the myths. Um, I think that from a positives perspective, like I said earlier, there's a whole world outside of the hospital and outside of clinical care, and I've loved every minute of it, to be honest. I mean, there's lots of I'm lucky enough to have a friend circle that's explored different areas in medicine. So I have a really good friend working for like Doctors Without Borders in friends working Doctors Without Borders, and they've worked in Yemen, in Chhattisgarh, in Sudan, they've worked Ethiopia, they've worked in all of these countries, and so that's a whole different world of healthcare, in a way still related to clinical medicine. There's lots of people who go into like IAS and public health and things like that. There's people like me who go into pharma and devices and consulting, and so I know other people who've gone into investing and venture capital and banking. So I think the options for doctors are unbelievable. Healthcare, like I said, is very, very broad. And so that's a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gives you so many options, and you have thousands and thousands of things to choose from. The bad thing is too many choices is also not good. So I'm sitting here and talking to you right now, and I still don't know what I want to do next. And I have lots of interests in areas I'm, very excited about, but I still don't know what I want to do next. And so, for example, gene and cell therapy excites me like crazy. It is absolutely cutting edge. You can potentially move from treating symptoms to curing diseases. The vaccines and mRNA has been such an exciting space. And so that's one area that excites me. But the other one is space medicine. And so with more and more people looking at space travel, space medicine has become a whole different line of medicine altogether, which is just unbelievable to think about. Um, and so, you know, healthcare right now is huge, and there's so many options, and it's expanding more and more every single day. And so I think that's the part of it I love the most. There's always, more interesting things to read about. There's interesting people to meet. And there's options out there. But there are negatives that come with it. One, like I said, is too many options is also not a good thing, because you don't know what to choose, and you're constantly worried about where to go. One way to do it is to figure out what you don't like versus what you like. And so what I've done over the years is I'll have a list of things that I like doing, and then as I work in different companies and different projects, I'll rule out stuff. So I'm like, okay, I don't like this, I don't like this. I used to do it with my MD and MS as well. So when you're choosing which specialty you want, when I went through internship, okay, I don't like OBGYN, I don't like internal medicine. I would slowly cut those out. And so you're slowly coming to a shorter and shorter list. And so I try and do the same thing even outside of medicine. Try and find what you don't like by exploring different things and talking to people, and then that's how you get to a shorter list, versus if you try and find the one thing that you like, that can be very, very hard to do. The other thing is, and I get this a lot from people who talk to me about trying to transition, is I want better work-life balance. There's lots of people who say that and they want to quit medicine, but that's not always the case, to be honest. There's obviously lots of jobs out there that are 9 to 5, and you work Monday to Friday, you have your weekends free, all of those things exist. You have more paid time off. And so there's lots of benefits. But for example, consulting and banking and some of these sectors where you get paid a lot, where you get paid more than other sectors, you can be, I have lots of friends who work 12, 16-hour days, they work weekends, they work late at night. Once you leave the office, it's not like leaving the hospital and the patient is in the hospital and you hand it off. Like your work continues after you go home, and you go home and you open your laptop again because it follows you home. So, and that's not true of all jobs, don't get me wrong, but don't fall for this fallacy that, my work-life balance is 100% going to be better after medicine. It can go the other way as well. And so when you're picking what to do, like, get out of medicine for the right reasons. If you're doing it because you want to work less and, focus on your hobbies and on travel and stuff, that's great. You should do that. But there's also a chance you're going to get paid significantly less for a job like that. You may be lucky and get a high paying job which lets you do that, but there's a chance that it goes the other way around and you're working your butt off to be able to sustain that lifestyle. So I think that work-life balance one is something that people I guess, don't take into consideration. That's, I think, my number one pushback whenever someone's trying to quit. The number two one, and I see this a lot, is a lot of people have an ego when they quit medicine. So they assume that because they studied for 6.5 years and they have that MD and that DR before and after their name, that they're suddenly better than everyone else. But you have to understand that when you get out of the hospital, you're at the same level as everyone. Um, I'll give you a simple example. The projects that I've worked on in pharma, we learn about hypertension in college, we learn about diabetes and things like that. But a lot of the drugs we're looking at are for rare diseases that Sjogren's syndrome and lupus nephritis and things like that, you may have heard of. There'll be like 3, 4 MCQs, or you'll have one small section of Harrison that has that topic, but you don't actively learn those as much as you learn diabetes and hypertension. So when you transition to the industry, the areas that they expect you to be knowledgeable on are not exactly the same ones you studied. And so don't come in with that ego that you know more than everyone else. Where you do have a slight advantage is you can go through research on PubMed and Google Scholar and maybe understand it quicker than someone who's not got a medical degree. So because some of those terms that you don't have to Google every fourth word because you understand those terms. So someone says resistant hypertension, you don't necessarily have to Google it because you know what that means by reading it all of these years. So be open-minded and don't have an ego when you go in. And I see a lot of people who have an MBBS have, that ego that, because I'm a doctor, I know better than people who don't have a medical degree. And that's not necessarily the case. I've met tons of people without medical degrees who know way more about clinical topics than I do, just by virtue of working in that space. So I think that's the number two. And I think the number three is taking risks. Medical college and all of those pathways don't encourage you to take risks. It is the safest thing ever. They map out your life from birth to death. You go through MBBS, you do your NEET, you do your MD, you do your, DM, you get a job, you go from senior consultant, professor, assistant professor, HOD, retire, get your pension. They map out your journey to the day that you retire. Whereas when you get out of medicine, nothing is mapped. And it's a lot of that mapping is up to you. And so people get very scared to take those risks. And I was in the same boat. I think that has been one of the scariest things I've ever done. It drove me crazy, especially when I was searching for a job, for my first job before Pfizer worked out. The fear was unbelievable. I was, I didn't know how to apply for jobs. Like I said earlier, I didn't know how to write a resume. This concept of networking to get a job was unheard of. I had no clue what a referral was. First of all, where do you even search for a job? Simple stuff like that. How do I create a LinkedIn profile? It's very, very small things that when you are outside of medicine are considered basic and everyone knows. But when you come out of MBBS, like I said, you have to get out of that bubble and burst that bubble. And you have to be open to taking those risks. I'm not saying get out of medicine and start a company, but be open to slowly taking those risks and being able to do that. And it's almost a mindset shift that takes a little bit of time. And I mean, I've been out of medicine since 2015. So, it's almost 9, 10 years now. And I'm still shedding that, risk aversity. There's still a part of me that's, trying to avoid risk as much as I can. And so that's something that you have to actively work on over a period of time. And so those are the three things that I would take away. So one is put the ego aside, two is start taking risks, and three is, be open to different things. I think those are the three most important things to think about. They're not necessarily negative things, but I think work-life balance was the third one. It's not negative things, but I think they're myths or maybe eye-openers that I wish I knew when I was getting out of medicine at that point, because I didn't know anyone else who had made that journey. Now I know tons of people, and it seems like every fourth person I meet has a medical degree and has gotten out. But it's for some reason it feels like a very lonely place when when you initially make that decision. I think the last thing I'll say on that front is the loneliness is very real. You feel like you're the only person making that move. Um, and it can be extremely scary because everyone around you is saying, why are you wasting your life? You've already spent 6.5 years studying. Why are you bothering to make the switch now? Just do your MD or just do your DM. Why are you taking all of these risks? Get a stable job. You'll be in a safer place, monetarily, which makes sense, to be honest. It is a stable life. Being a doctor is very stable. If the economy crashes tomorrow, I'm probably going to be the first person to lose my job because consulting will take a huge hit. But a doctor and a hospital are still going to be there. Regardless of whether the economy is doing well or not doing well, people are going to fall sick. And so it's a very recession-proof job. Whereas bankers, consultants, all of these other jobs, there's a high chance that you can lose your job when the market goes up and down. And so stability-wise, it's amazing. But it may not give you I speak for myself, I cannot speak for everyone else. I would not be fulfilled sitting in a hospital. I love learning new things. I love exploring, and personal life as well as professional life. And so it wasn't right for me. If you're a person who likes stability, that's brilliant. But if you do want to explore, you are excited about stuff outside of pure patient care. Sometimes you have to learn to ignore those people or learn to take their advice, but also think with your own head and get out there. But it's a scary place to be. Just remember that there's lots of others like that who have made that move. It's just a question of going out and finding them.
That was a wonderful insights about the pros and cons of choosing the unconventional path. So, what is the salary range one can expect after completion of his MBA?